So our speaker tonight, Dr. L.J. Krumenacker, grew up in Blackfoot, Idaho. He started collecting fossils in high school, still is not done. Father of two great kids who seem to have not inherited this interest in fossils. I know how that works. LJ has a Bachelor of Science in Biology from ISU, his Master's in Geology from BYU, and his PhD is in Earth Sciences at Montana State. He's the affiliate curator and researcher at the Idaho Museum of Natural History, which is a terrific museum with the best Helicopyran collection in the world, easily. And if you don't know what that is, well, you should have come on the field trip there. LJ works on Idaho dinosaurs. He works on the Green River Formation, the fossil fish and everything else down in southwest Wyoming. He works on a bird nest site in Utah and Cambrian and Triassic fossils of Idaho, as well as the Jurassic Formation in Utah. So please join me in welcoming Dr. L.J. Krumenacker.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so just checking in. Everyone can see this Zoom. Everyone can hear me. Okay. All right, so thank you for that introduction, Mike. I appreciate it. So to jump right into this. So I started off as a fossil nerd, as you guys heard about. It was really sad when I was in middle school and high school. I remember getting some old geology books, and they talked about how no dinosaur fossils had been found in Idaho. And I'm pretty stubborn. I wanted to go out and look anyway. So I talked to my advisor at Idaho State, you'll see in a minute, and he said, I'll go out to these spots where they found a few little bone fragments. And I've been doing that for 15, 20 years now, and been able to find, myself and my colleagues, a fair amount of Idaho dinosaurs and other fossils. And ever since that day, my life's just gone downhill, as you can see right there. So a little bit about my background. You guys heard about my degrees, but I always have to acknowledge, so here's my advisor, Bill Ackerston from Idaho State. Bill passed away 2 years ago. He was a great guy, and he's the one that sent me out looking for Idaho dinosaur fossils. This ornery old fart right here is Dr. Brooks Britt from BYU.
LJ, we can't see your screen on Zoom.
Oh, wait, let me.
You need to share your screen again.
Okay, let me see. So share screen. Let's see here. Okay. Is that showing now?
Just a minute. Can you go back? Yep, that's perfect. You're on your background. Yep.
Okay, cool. Apologies on that. So, okay.
That's okay.
So, Bill, the honorary old cuss Brooks that I mentioned, good guy from BYU, but I like to make fun of him. And Dr. Dave Riccio from Montana State. He specializes in dinosaur eggs. But these guys have all been my mentor and have been great supporters helping me get to where I am today. So as far as study locations, get you guys oriented where I do a lot of my work. So we're up here. Here's Jackson right up here. I work in what's highlighted with blue and green down here, all through eastern Idaho. As mentioned, my main interests are in the age of dinosaurs, though I do like to do stuff in the Paleozoic, and I grudgingly admire some Paleogene mammals and things like that. But where I work is all through here in easternmost Idaho. So just in case you need a geology refresher, my big thing again is the age of dinosaurs going from about 250 to 66 million years ago. So you can just see bracketed right here. Mostly Triassic and Cretaceous. I don't know much about the Jurassic of Idaho, to be honest. No one's really looked at it. It's on my to-do list. See what we can figure out. All right, so to get you started. So the title of this talk, give or take, if I remember what I did right, was Inland Seas and Upland Dinosaurs. So for this talk, I'm going to talk about early Mesozoic and the Triassic, where Idaho was an inland sea. And then we'll go into the Cretaceous where I do my dinosaur work, where we were actually exposed above land in kind of a desert highland. But to start off with some of the things that I have an interest in that I've helped with in the Triassic, here's Idaho, bracketed in the red. You can see again that we're in inland seas. You come into Wyoming and get just farther east here, then you start getting onto dry land. But back there in Idaho, it's underwater. It's a shallow marine sea on the west coast of Pangaea, and we were close to the equator. This is just a map showing where some of these Triassic rocks are here in Idaho. The Triassic are purple. So if you know the town of Montpelier right here, Soda Springs, Georgetown, you have a fair amount of Triassic rocks again there in easternmost Idaho. If you want to see a global context of what it looked like in the Triassic at this time, here's the supercontinent Pangaea in the bottom right. And Idaho would just be just offshore right there. Okay, so to give you some context, so there's I'm kind of a teacher, so I like to ask lots of questions. So don't mind me if I do and give you a chance to answer. But for you geology folk out there, does anyone know what was the big event that happened right at the end of the Permian that was biologically important?
The Great Dying.
The Great Dying. The worst.
Need to repeat answers for the students because they won't hear me.
No worries. So yeah, the Great Dying. So the worst extinction in the history of planet Earth, as far as we know, occurred right at the boundary between the Paleozoic and Mesozoic at the end of the Permian about 252 million years ago. With a bit of a grain of salt, 96% of everything in the ocean went extinct. 2/3 of what was on land went extinct. And the leading contender at the moment for this is, surprise, surprise, a lot of climate change exacerbated by volcanism in Russia that just happened to burn right through a bunch of big coal beds too. So it was like insult to injury. But this acidified the oceans, broke down the food chains, and again, it's the closest life ever came on the planet to totally getting snuffed out. The stuff that I work on in Idaho is right after that extinction. It's just about 1 to 2 million years after that extinction when life was on the rebound. The oldest stuff after that, or let me rephrase that, the oldest Triassic fossils there right after that extinction are what are in the Thames limestone. It's the earliest Triassic. I think you get the Thames out here if I remember right. Don't quote me on that. But some of the fossils I've had an interest in these earliest Triassic rocks, about 251 million years old, are in what's called the Macosaurus zone. So this is a zone of ammonoid fossils that are very, very dense. I'll show you some pictures here. I've got the slab that you'll see up there. I've got a picture of it right in here, so you can see it too. But here in the Macosaurus zone, this is right when life was trying to recover. During this time, there were still a lot of fluctuations, a lot of little extinctions going on as well. But you get good examples of these rocks in the Soda Springs area. If any of you guys ever want to go out and look for these fossil ammonoids near Soda Springs, just hit me up. I'm always taking people out there. But the Macosaurus zone is cool because it's literally chock full of ammonoids. So it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but you get into this layer of limestone, and if you know where you're at and you hit it with a hammer and you break it open, there are just dozens and dozens of these ammonoids. If you don't know what an ammonoid is, the shell kind of looks like a snail, but it would have a cephalopod in it, like an octopus sort of organism. And these guys are really, really common marine fossils in the Mesozoic. You get lots of different species. I don't know much about them. I just think they're cool. My goal in the Macosaurus zone, I'll tell you in a minute. It's thought that these could be like huge extinction events, as far as I understand too, where you just get this huge shell assemblage. What I'm interested in, so I love the little squishy animals. I think they're cool. I love trilobites. I love ammonites. But I want to find in the Macosaurus zone what are, or what seem to be marine reptiles. There's occasional ichthyosaurs. If you guys know ichthyosaurs that look like a dolphin. There's hints of ichthyosaurs in the Macosaurus zone, which would be among some of the oldest. There's great big fish hinted at in the Macosaurus zone by bones, but no one's ever purposefully looked. So my goal is to purposefully look for some of these organisms. All right, so one of the most important discoveries that I happened to stumble across just because I was a lucky kid one day, I skipped class NISU, I'm bad. And I wanted to go fossil hunting. So I went to a place called Paris Canyon near Bear Lake. And as I pulled up my little Geo Metro next to this outcrop, you can see right here, I pulled my car up there, I got out, I picked up a random rock, I hit it with a hammer, it split in half, and in that rock were 7 shark teeth, just like this. They're not super big, they're only about, centimeter and a half long, but from a small shark. What's frustrating, I've gone back to this place like 24 times since. I've never found another stinking shark tooth. I have tried. It's not even fair. But those shark teeth got my attention. Also, I started finding little fossil shrimp. Shrimp are fairly soft-bodied. They're harder to find as fossils. But I found these shrimp and then these things right here that I didn't know what the heck they were. And it took about 10 years to figure out what they are, and I'll talk about them in a minute. But this got my attention, and I started to go back just as a little fossil nerd, see what I could find. This whole fossil assemblage is what's called the Paris Biota. And this occurs about 1.5 million years after that great dying. And this is a very important fossil site. It's extremely diverse. It's what you call a Lagerstadt. If you guys have heard the term Lagerstadt, it's a place where you get good fossil preservation and a diversity of organisms. And I want to go and quarry this place like the Burgess Shale, do a quarry like that, get some students together. That's on my to-do list. And I'll show you the different organisms we have from here and tell you a little bit more about the importance. All right, so the Paris Biota is the most diverse assemblage of organisms that we have in the world for right after the Permian extinction. It's the one closest to the extinction. Prior to this point, it was thought that it took about 10 million years for marine ecosystems to recover, but this site shows it actually happened within about 1.5 million years. It was a big thing. I was like, whoa, I found the coolest site ever. We got scientists from Utah working on it, Dr. Brachiopods from, I can't remember which university in France, sorry, Arnaud. But Dr. Brachiopods that's working on this, he kind of lets me tag along and help. They've done a lot of things. We're able to publish papers in Nature on this. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do a paper in Nature. So I was excited. But we've got 7 different phyla, 20 metazoan orders from this spot, all sorts of different organisms. You have some organisms that make their very first appearance in the history of life, including some things like starfish and some of these squid-like animals. And we have a Lazarus Taxon, a leptomitid sponge they'll talk about in a minute, and I'll translate that for you so you know what in the flip I'm talking about. All right, so just going through some of the organisms that we have. Okay, so we have this Hyperdonut shark. Like I mentioned, I have never found more of these shark teeth, and I want to. Ooh, I hit a button. Okay, there's about 7 teeth in this one slab, probably from the same individual. They probably belong to a guy called a Crotus. And I'm just going to spitball the size of the shark here based on the teeth, maybe 1 meter long, not super big. Cute little fellow, would be fun in your swimming pool. Looks something like this. So we've got those sharks as among the apex predators in that fossil assemblage. And there's hints of fish. You'll find lots of fish bones. If you guys are familiar with fish skeletons, they're a real pain in the butt if they're broken up into little isolated bones, trying to figure out what goes where. But you will find all these fishy bones that I'd like to get identified here at the Paris Biota spot. Among them are tooth plates. What you're seeing right here is actually a tooth plate with all these bumps. This organism would use this fish to crush shelled things like ammonoids and clams. There are other places in the same rock layer near Soda Springs where we've got complete fish. It drives me crazy because I keep hearing stories about people accidentally finding these fish. And when I go out and purposefully try to find them and split the shale, I can't find them. But there's a lot of potential, and there's some sites that the Paris Biota team with Dr. Brachiopods, again, let me tag along, that we've gone out to and they've gone out to, where they're starting to find articulated fish like this. And that's just one thing. I just love a good fossil fish. So I want to see more like this. And we've got ones like this that this guy would have those shell crushing teeth. Kind of hard to make out here, but you can see the reconstruction right here. This one is called Bobisatrania. These guys are common lower Triassic fish all over the world. Some get about 1 meter long. This one's only about, I think, 5-6 inches long. We've got coprolites. If you don't know what a coprolite is, that's a fossil turd. Okay. The worst thing with coprolites is trying to figure out who dung it. Okay. I can't take credit for that joke. I've heard it before, but it's good to use. But so you've got somebody's turds. You're trying to figure out who was eating things and making these coprolites. In some of them, you'll find little hooks from these ammonoids' arms and these cephalopods. Probably fish coprolites, maybe a few ichthyosaur coprolites. We've got algae. Algae is not the most exciting organism, at least if you're me and like vertebrates, but it forms the base of the food chain. You don't usually find it as fossils. We get fossil algae at this site, which is pretty weird for soft-bodied fossil. We get your little shellfish, these little brachiopods here. You get round ones called orbiculoid brachiopods, if I remember right. You get ones here like linguola, if I can ever pronounce it right. But these are very common in the Paris biota. You get sponges. I mentioned the Lazarus Taxon. So if you guys are familiar with the biblical story of Lazarus that was raised from the dead, a Lazarus taxon is where you get a fossil organism showing up way after it's supposed to be extinct. So it's not the most fancy looking thing, but this is a fossil that took me about 10 years to get identified. So here's an ammonoid. Ammonoid's easy to recognize. But this wormy thing here, I had it sitting in my fossil collection for about 10 years at home, trying to figure out what it was. I'd take it to different professors and show it to them, different paleontologists. Excuse me, no one could figure it out. Finally, I showed it to some of my friends on the Paris Biota team. Jim Jenks down in Utah, a great ammonite specialist, and Dr. Breyer, and they said, oh, that is a leptomatidid sponge, to use the fancy words. And they said, those supposedly went extinct 450 million years ago. These rocks are 250 million years ago. So that was one thing that got them excited, is here we had a new species of sponge that belonged to this group that was supposed to be way long dead. They named that Pseudoleptomitis adventus, but I just call them lepto because it's easy to remember. But these are just cute little sponges that look kind of like this. And I was so happy. Like I said, it took 10 years to figure out what that was. And I'm a dinosaur guy. It's like, I don't know what that is. It's just weird. Ammonoids.
Is that on the table there?
Yep, we've got one on the table that I'll show you. So ammonoids, we have, at this spot, we've named at least one new species, genus and species of ammonoid, called Albinitis Americanus. These are among the most common fossils there. They're really easy to find. They're not particularly pretty. They're flattened, but they're pretty cool. So just in case you don't know what the ammonoids look like, so here again, you've got your snail shell. Then it has like the cephalopod head right here. This is a good index fossil too, that we can use in the future to date rocks right to about 251 million years old. We've got colloid cephalopods, which is fancy speak for things like a cuttlefish. Think of like a cuttlefish bone that your pet bird might use to sharpen its beak. But these are colloid cephalopods right here. These guys have an internal skeleton that basically looks like a bullet. These are very rare, but we named a new species from this spot called Idaho Parisiana. Easy enough to recognize the name there. It actually has little bits of the ink preserved in the body there too. We had other cephalopods. So these look kind of like the ones I just showed you, except these have an external shell right here. These are called orthocones. And again, they're not particularly pretty, but we get these orthocones in this spot. There was a spot I just went to this year. So there's a really nice guy up near Bear Lake. He has a house on top of the hill in Paris Canyon. He took his backhoe, was excavating for his property. And some of my colleagues saw that on aerial maps and went and talked to him, and they went and started splitting shale up there. And in that shale, you get tons and tons of these orthocones and some shark teeth, which made me happy. So my favorite among the arthropods there. So arthropods are things like your lobsters and shrimp. You get these really weird guys, and there's one that looks just like this on the table I can show you later. That these things are called Thylacocephalins. So this is the shell right here. Right here's the eye notch, where the eye would be. What's crazy though, these things look like someone from a nightmare or a sci-fi movie. So you got the giant eyes, then they have these 3 sets of giant grabbing claws that come out. These guys would be so awesome in a fish tank, I wish. These Thylacocephalins from the Paris Biota near Bear Lake, these were the first ones known from North America. They're fairly rare, and there's 2 species that we've named from this spot as well. Lobsters, okay? I'm not a huge person for seafood, but I do love fossil lobsters. I think they're pretty cool. Most of the time we find these in the Paris Biota, you'll find the tails. I have a tail of a lobster up there I'll show you. Not super easy to see, You can see the UV fluorescent image here to try and help you see it better. These guys surprised me. Last year I got an email from Dr. Breyer. He says, oh, I'm attaching a PDF. It's a surprise for you. And they named a lobster after me. It's Pemphix Krumenacker from this spot. My daughter has me in her phone as Lobster Man. So. You get shrimp there. Again, I'm a nerd for arthropods. I said I like trilobites. I love these shrimp and lobsters you find at Paris Canyon. There's a few slabs that have been found that have like dozens and dozens of shrimp on them. You get two different kinds. They haven't been named yet, but shrimp are moderately common. And then I heard some of you guys going, ooh, when you saw this. We have one out of thousands and thousands of fossils collected from this spot. We have one starfish right here. It's named Shoshinura, and it's just tiny. So, I mean, it's just like 2 inches across, guesstimating here, 2 or 3. But how gorgeous is that? That's just pretty. We get crinoids, which are related to starfish at this site too. They look like flowers that grew underwater. They would just filter feed. They're not particularly pretty, but they're super rare. Some of you guys probably know Forrest Gahn at BYU, Idaho. He wants to go out to the site and see if he can find more crinoids. So hopefully we can do that. But to show you the whole kit and caboodle here, this is a lovely picture here done by Jorge Gonzalez that puts everything that we found from that site in context. I've got this hanging up on my wall at home. We don't have ichthyosaurs from this spot yet, other than possible coprolites, but they are probably there's apex predators. But everything else you see here, this likes to skip around. Everything else you see here, we do have. And then again, my favorite, the Thylacocephalins there. So this is a great spot because it shows us how quickly marine ecosystems recovered after the worst extinction. I mean, if you look at 1.5 million years is fast. I mean, geologically, that's pretty fast. But it shows us how quickly that we were able to get ecosystems rebounding after that extinction. And now Dr. Breyer and his team are trying to find things like this in other places to see if it was global or regional. And they found spots in Nevada and Utah that they've been doing research on as well. So that's a little bit about your Triassic stuff. So like I say, I'm a dinosaur guy, but I absolutely love that Triassic stuff. I love the idea of being able to go swimming with a bunch of ancient critters if I had the chance. But now we're going to skip over the Jurassic. Nobody cares about the Jurassic, right? It's not like Wyoming has cool Jurassic dinos that are a pain in the butt because they're giant. Okay. We're going to go to the Cretaceous. So we're going to go upland. We're coming out of the ocean. We're going to about 100 million years ago. First thing you need to know when you are looking at Cretaceous fossils in Idaho is the outcrops really suck, okay? If you look on the left right here, this is Utah. This is down the San Rafael Swell in the Cedar Mountain Formation, called the Mustn't Touch It member. Right here, this is the best outcrop of dinosaur-bearing rocks in Idaho we have. You can see how 99% of everything is covered with sagebrush and pine trees. I unofficially wonder if there will ever be like a forest fire that goes through and clears stuff off for me. I am in no way advocating that, but I would love to see more outcrop. So a lot of the time you spend in Idaho when you're looking for dinosaurs is first you're looking for rocks to look at. So Idaho dinosaurs, my bread and butter here, they come from what's called the Wayan Formation. Has anybody ever been out to the teeny tiny town of Wayan? It's out northeast of Soda Springs. Okay. So it's named after the post office of that town. The Wayan Formation is made of a whole bunch of muds and silts. It's mostly siltstones and mudstones, but there's a little bit of sandstones and conglomerates in there. The Wayan is ridiculously thick. For a rock formation, it is about 3/4 of a mile thick, assuming that I did my master's thesis correctly. So hopefully, as far as I can tell, it's about 1,344 meters thick. It is insane because that's 3/4 of a mile of rock deposited in maybe 7 million years, give or take. So, and if you want to get picky in the Cretaceous, this spans what's called the Albian to Cenomanian stages. So about 101 to 95 million years ago. This outcrop you see right here, this is another view of the best outcrop that exists. Most of it is covered up. But to show you how prolific it can be, right there, you could barely see a bucket. And that bucket's where I dug up a dinosaur skeleton. Let's see here. I dug up another skeleton right here. Last week I was out, and because I'm extremely persistent / insane, I found another skeleton right there. And then I found another skeleton over the hill on that other side and a burrow that I'll show you. So if you get in just the right layers, it seems to be really, really prolific for at least some of these dinosaurs. So to show you what the paleogeography looked like. So like I mentioned, we're way out of the ocean now. It's similar to what it's like now. Eastern Idaho would have had mountains to the west, and then it would have had an upland floodplain. If you came down here into Jackson, you'd be getting towards the beach and the inland sea, called the Maori Seaway. But going west, we would have been in kind of an upland desert at the toe of the mountains where we're finding these things. The climate was monsoonal. And what I mean by monsoonal is you had a distinct wet season and a distinct dry season. And the red right there again highlights that part of eastern Idaho. Okay, as far as the stratigraphy, just since we're in Jackson here to name some rocks in case you know what it correlates with. So the Wayan Formation there in Idaho would correlate with here in western Wyoming with what's called the Aspen Formation and Bear River Formation and the Frontier Formation possibly. Also, if you've heard of the Maori Shale, the Wayan's equivalent to that. As far as why we care about these dinosaurs, so don't take this personally, but Wyoming and Utah are kind of spoiled for dinosaurs. You guys have outcrops, you have a lot of Mesozoic rocks. The reason a lot of scientists care about these ones that I've helped with in Idaho is because they are from a time period where rocks of that age with dinosaurs in them are super rare. There's some in Utah, some in Idaho, and a little sliver in Montana, and that's it. So it's a whole new time period that scientists don't know much about that we can get information for. So it's a special time and a special place, and I'll kind of wrap up talking about that too. Okay, the most common dinosaur. Okay, this guy, this is my dinosaur child. This is called Eryctodromeus cubicularis. I just call it Erycto. It's found in the Wayan Formation and the equivalent rocks in southwestern Montana, out near Lima Peaks. As of the last time I counted, there are about 45 localities that I have found bones from Erycto in. He's a small, plant-eating, ornithischian dinosaur. By far, he's the most common Idaho dinosaur. If you're to find a dinosaur bone in Idaho, 90% of the time it's going to be from this guy. And I'll talk more about that later. We've got 15 skeletons, give or take. There's one right now up in Bozeman at Montana State that I've got a friend working on in the lab. That's going to probably be the best one we've got. But it's got the legs all in place, articulated, curled up under the butt, and attached to the butt is the tail on one side and the back on another. Then there's a chunk of rock next to it that's got some of the arm bones in place. So I'm hoping it's a nice little whole skeleton. I don't want to verbally say that I want a skull, but how cool would that be if we actually had a skull in there? If you were to pay close attention to my red stained pants, it's because last week I found a new skeleton of this guy in a bunch of red mudstone. And when I got these out of the washer today, I was like, oh, the mudstone stained my pants. So.
What's the height and length of this one?
This guy would be about hip height and about 11 feet long. He's kind of crazy. So it's 7 foot of tail. He's got 55 plus vertebrae just in his tail, which is really weird. It's really long, 2/3 of his length. But then maybe 3 feet high, something like that. Not particularly big. Something important about this animal is this is the first known burrowing animal. My PhD advisor from Bozeman, Dave Verricchio that I mentioned, he found this burrow, if you can just make it out right here, see this white tube that kind of cuts across these other layers of rock. This turned out to be a burrow, and it turned out that this Erycto was an organism that would burrow in the ground, kind of like a dinosaur equivalent of a prairie dog is how I imagine it. And what's cool is often in the base of the burrows, you'll find a skeleton of assumedly the mom or dad, an adult, and then you'll find bones of some babies. So it looks like they would nest and raise their kids underground. The skeleton I found last week, I'm really excited because it's one of these where I've got bones from a grown-up and bones from some kiddos. So I'm hoping there's a lot more there when I go out in the next few weeks and collect it. But this is the first known dinosaur that was a burrower. So again, this is the Montana burrow. Here's a nice example of an Idaho burrow. I published on this a few years ago. I was out, my advisor was talking to some students. We had a 2-week paleontology field class. My advisor was standing right there talking to some students. I was just walking behind and saying, oh, I wonder if there's any bones. And I found some tail bones down right here. And then I found where the bones were coming out of the hill up here. I excavated, couldn't see any evidence of a burrow in the excavation, because anytime we look for Richter, we're like, oh, can we see a burrow? Couldn't see any evidence for it. So we did one of these plaster jackets like you do to collect dinosaurs. You can see it right here. And as soon as I'd cleaned around the jacket, I was like, well, what's this? There's this weird round tube right here. I'm like, oh, it's just a big concretion. I'm like, oh, I better clean around it just to make sure. And I did. And lo and behold, it turned into another burrow. You can see this tube right here. The rocks are tilted about 45 degrees to the left. So this is like the ancient ground surface. You can see like here's where the entrance to the burrow would have been. And the animal would have come down here. And then the burrow probably extended farther to where the skeleton was. But I was so happy that we finally found this Idaho burrow. If you want to see a good image of it, ask me for my email. And I've got a photogrammetric file online of this where you can rotate it and look at it in 3D. And you can see the structure really good. One thing I should point out just randomly. So this skeleton I found last week, I have a hypothesis. I can't prove it, but at the moment, I wonder if these guys I mentioned, I think of them as like dinosaur prairie dogs. I wonder if they actually lived in colonies where there'd be multiple individuals, because literally 30 feet from this burrow in the same layer of rocks is where I found that skeleton last week. And then if you go about 100 feet away in the same layer of rock, there's another skeleton I found. And it seems like they're concentrated there. So I don't know if they'd be like a bunch of, dinosaur prairie dogs, like I say, hanging out in a colony. How crazy is that? So what we've learned about Orthocrones. So we've managed to slice open some of the bones in the leg, looked at the features in there to figure out the age. This is just an image. I've got this hanging up on my wall because, again, I'm a nerd. But this is a lovely image of an Orthocrones thigh bone cross-section under a polarized microscope. You can see the bone cells here. And I just think it looks like abstract art. But from doing this thin sectioning of the bones, we were able to figure out that the kids that we usually find in the burrows are probably less than a year old. There's a middle size that seems to be fairly common. I call them young adults that look to be about 5 years old at max. Then the biggest specimens may be 6, 7 years old or more. So not a huge long lifespan, but this is the best evidence we've got so far for how these things grew up and matured. Something that makes me really happy. So like I said, when I grew up, we didn't have any dinosaurs in Idaho we could identify. I was so happy when we finally got this. And a bunch of school kids and some teachers and myself this spring managed to get the governor of Idaho to designate Orthocrones as the state dinosaur. So I was really happy we got to do that. So it made me quite happy. If you guys go to the museum in Pocatello, you can see this exhibit right here. This was made by middle schoolers who used my PhD dissertation to digitally sculpt on computer all the bones and print them out on a 3D printer. And this is lovely. I've got a little example of this sitting up on my wall at home, little baby Erecto. Makes me happy. Okay, so other animals, okay? Erecto is cool, but one thing I like about dinosaurs is I like the diversity. I want to know what else was living with them. We have very fragmentary evidence for other dinosaurs. And when I say fragmentary, I mean in, let's see here, 35 years of people looking for dinosaurs in Idaho, we have found 3 teeth from one of these. And that's it, 3 teeth. And we have very, very beat up chunks of backbone, maybe part of a jaw and some pieces from some sort of iguanodontian like this, maybe something similar to Nontosaurus you get here in Wyoming, or Eolambia you get in rocks in Utah, but kind of sort of a duck-billed dinosaur, give or take. I would love to find more evidence for these, but these guys are stubborn to find. Something I'm really excited on right now. So I've started a job at the College of Eastern Idaho the past year. They are so awesome. They have been spending tons of money getting supplies so I can build a fossil prep lab at the college there. So I can start to get students to help me out. And our first project is going to be, this is going to be the biggest dinosaur skeleton known from Idaho. It's been sitting around for almost 20 years not getting worked on. I asked Dave, I said, hey, Dave, can I work on this? No one's done anything with it. He's like, yeah, go for it. So I've got my students at the College of Eastern Idaho, the supplies that they've bought me, and starting this fall, we're going to start cleaning up all the bones from this armored dinosaur, some sort of ankylosaur. Probably a new species, just based on the time and age. So far, bones that I know we have limb bones and tail bones and back bones and armor plates and toe bones and claws. No hint of a skull so far, but we've only prepared about 25–30% of it. So I'm really hoping that we've got a skull, and to get this out and get it named. It'll probably take a few years because I've got to do it in my unpaid free time. But I am so excited to have something that's not a ricto. No offense to a ricto. Oh, something else that's really cool. So we have these. Make sure I didn't skip something. Yeah, there we go. We have these eggs from Idaho. These are dinosaur eggs. These are the largest dinosaur eggs known from North America. They're called Macroelongutulithus. It's a really creative name. Macro means big, elongu means long, and ithus means egg. Really big egg, or really long egg, okay? But these eggs are roughly about 16 inches long. And they are not very pretty. You can see here's the drawing showing these two pairs right here. Or one pair. Here's one egg. Here's what's left of another. This spot, about 20 years ago, I was out with a friend, Steve Robison. He was a Forest Service geologist, another one of my mentors. And we went out and found this little tiny hill, and we're out looking for dinosaur fossils, and there's these dirt bike tracks going up and over the hill. And we went and looked at it. Right in the middle of the dirt bike tracks, there were literally hundreds of pieces of dinosaur eggshell, all on this side of the hill. It was so stinking cool. Never found another place like that. Showed them to my advisor, Dave in Bozeman. He came down with a team, they excavated, and they got this little pair of eggs. There's probably a lot more left in that hill. It's just really hard to excavate. They're smeared and compressed. But these are the next most common dinosaur fossil to a ricto you will find. If you were to go out in the Wayan, it's not super hard to find with a lot of persistence, at least one or two little pieces of eggshell from these guys. These eggs are also found in China, in rocks of the same age. Again, they're called Macroelongutulithus. They're much more common in China where they have better outcrops. This helped us, though, with these things in China, helped us identify the animal that was laying these eggs. Okay, I call it the hell chicken because it looks like a giant chicken. What's really, really frustrating with the hell chicken is we have never ever, and I wouldn't literally kill, I would figuratively kill to find one of these. We've not found a single bone to this animal ever in Idaho. But we've got lots of eggshell, those two partial eggs, some other partial eggs. And the way that we know that's what this egg belongs to is in China, in those eggs, they found the little babies. If you slice through the eggshell, there's a specific crystal structure that's unique to these eggs. And if you look at the ornamentation on the eggshell, it's unique to it. So that's how we figured out we have these giant hell chickens in Idaho. So another thing that's got me excited, so I think I'm allowed to talk this up now. In October, the museum in Pocatello is going to put together a big exhibit on all our Idaho dinosaurs. First time ever, I'm so excited. They are 3D printing reconstructed skeletons, this thing full size. They're the hell chicken. It's going to have its arms stretched out. I was trying to convince my son to get 3D scanned so they could put him in the mouth of the skeleton, but he wasn't going for it. But this will be the first skeleton of Gigantoraptor sort of organism, as this is called, in a museum in North America. We will have that this October, and I'm so stinking excited. And the eggs will be on exhibit. These things are good parents. If you look at a lot of fossils from Asia and now from North America, if you can kind of see what's going on here, you've got this dinosaur with its arms and legs, and the arms are wrapped around its eggs. It was brooding, just like birds. This is fairly well documented now for a number of theropod dinosaurs. And one thing I'd like to know, were these giant oviraptorosaurs, these hell chickens, were they brooding like that? Could they even sit on their eggs because they're so big? I'm guessing they were some sort of good parents, though. But it's just pretty cool to think about when you get a little bit to the family life of these organisms. And one of the most important dinosaur sites we have that's told us a lot about anything that's not a ricto and that is not one of the hell chickens is called the Robison Bone Bed. So it's named after my mentor. I mentioned Steve. Steve and I went out the same day I think we found that egg site. We went out to this hill before it was tore up like you see in the picture here. And in amongst the sagebrush are just a few blocks sticking out in an outcrop of this conglomerate. And we found, oh, there's bone in it. So I was like, okay, that's cool. The rock was super hard. You have to go back there with a sledgehammer. I still have blisters on my hand from being out there the other week. But the rock's super hard, but it's got a fair amount of bone in it. We couldn't do much with it because it was all covered in vegetation. I came back a few years later and I saw construction stakes going right through the hill. And I went and I talked to the Forest Service. I said, uh-oh. I said, what are you guys doing out there, if you don't mind me asking? They said, oh, we're going to quarry that hill and use the rock and crush it for gravel to fill the roads in. And so I talked to them and they were great. Like Caribou National Forest, I got to talk them up. Has always been so helpful with this. They're like, oh, it's full of dinosaurs. And that's probably. So they said, how about you come out when we do that? So what they did was they excavated the hill like you see here, took all this rock out, dumped it in huge piles. Then they took the water truck, sprayed it all off for me, and just let me hang out for a few days while they were doing that, kind of monitoring the site and collecting all the bones that we could. I still go out there now to where they've laid the rock out. The problem is, again, the vegetation, everything's grown up. So I look like a crazy person. It's right next to an established campground. And people watch me as I crawl down into the grass and they just see my butt sticking up in the air. And I'm poking around looking for rocks to break open with a hammer. But this spot is the most important dinosaur site we have in Idaho because it's shown us all these other animals we have that aren't the Erycto or the Gigantoraptor. This includes a Tyrannosaur. Incidentally, this is my favorite scene from Jurassic Park ever. If anyone knows a lawyer to get eaten by a T-Rex on a toilet, nothing personal. But we have a Tyrannosaur from this site, a Tyrannosauroid to be more specific. This is like one of T-Rex's great-great-great-great-grandparents. All we have is part of a thigh bone. I have a replica of the thigh bone up here. I can show you guys later. So you've got this thigh bone that you see right here. And it's just the upper 2/3 of it, but it's got distinct enough anatomical features that we can say it is a Tyrannosauroid. It's got blood vessels that go in certain parts of the shaft in just the right place. It's got muscle attachments you only get in Tyrannosauroids. It's similar to one from Utah, the same age, called Moros. This is probably a different species, but giving it a brand new species name based on just one bone would be bad form, so we didn't want to do that. But we published on this last year, I think. Based on slicing it open, like we did with the Eryctofemurs, it's probably about 5 years old. It wasn't fully grown, but it was getting there. We do also have teeth that are probably from this or very similar Tyrannosauroid too. So here are some of the teeth that are assigned to it. This right here is a premaxillary tooth. So from the front of the snout, you look at this, it's only not even a centimeter long. It's tiny. This is, when I say the grandparents of T-Rex, T-Rex's grandparents were a lot smaller than T-Rex actually was. But Tyrannosaur teeth are very distinct, the premaxillary teeth, when they have this shape in the base and then this shape on the side. Then I have these other weird median dinosaur teeth that are just very fat. And what's weird is Tyrannosaur teeth like this are, barring Spinosaurs, Tyrannosaur teeth like this are the only ones that get this fat for bone crunching. And we have these teeth that I think could be a Tyranno, but what's weird is they're teeny tiny. And I can't imagine a tiny Tyranno being a bone cruncher, but maybe that's what that tooth on the left goes to. It would be nice to have a skull. Here's my artistic reconstruction I did for our press release. You can't tell I'm a Star Trek nerd. And this is to show you the size of the Tyrannosaur next to a person. And I just put Captain Picard in the background. And I was hoping that someone in the interwebs would notice that with the press release, and some did. But so you can see it's not super big. It's not even as tall as me. So a smaller Tyrannosauroid, I'm sure it could still eat us. Okay? The apex predator in the Wayan, as far as I can tell, again, based on isolated teeth, I would again love to find some bones. But we have some teeth that get up to about 2.5 inches long that probably belong to something called a Carcharodontosaur. You guys heard of Allosaurus? These are like relatives of Allosaurus. This is a Carcharodontosaur from rocks a little bit older in Texas and Oklahoma called Acrocanthosaurus. But we probably had this guy as or something similar to this guy as our apex predator based on the isolated teeth. Extra credit and a gold star if anyone goes out there and finds me the skeleton of this guy. Raptors. Okay, everybody knows the raptors from Jurassic Park. We have a number of teeth from some sort of raptor, and again, it's just a teeth, so it's hard to say a lot. But based on the teeth size and shape, probably a few different kinds. I am particularly fond of this tooth you see right here. You can just see the little serrations on the side, like on a steak knife. This thing's 1/3 of a centimeter long. The reason I'm so proud of it is the fact I even saw it in the rock. Then we have other medium dinosaurs represented by weird little teeth like this, where, again, it's hard to say much about them. This is one thing that's frustrating with the Wayan is you get lots of animals represented, but very little complete specimens or near complete specimens to tell you much about them. Crocs, okay, so it's not just dinosaurs in the Wayan. Right now I'm working on a paper with Dr. Randy Ermis down at the museum in Salt Lake. We are describing these two Cretaceous crocodiles that we have from Idaho. This first one right here, so he was probably a dinosaur eating croc. His skull would be about 3 feet long, to give you an idea. His teeth are the size of your thumb. What you're seeing right here are just chunks of the snout. One of the main problems with this specimen is the only reason I found it is when they built the highway, they went through it. So I found what was left of the skull in this little highway road cut. Looks like the animal is probably about 20 feet long, maximum, so a fairly large crocodile. You wouldn't want to mess with it. Give you an idea, so not quite as big as this Dinosaurus here, but say about 2/3 as big. So more than big enough to cause a problem in your swimming pool. What I really, really love though, is this is a new species of croc. That other one might be a new species. We're not sure yet if we can justify naming it. This one is, and all we have is the back of the skull right here, the brain case. But the brain case has some very distinctive features that show this is the first time that we found this family of croc in North America. I can't really give details since it's not published yet, but it's a new species. All the other crocs like this are known from Asia and Europe. So again, it's the first North American one. It's about cat size. I'm going to name it after my celebrity crush right there. And a very generous benefactor, my friend Bob Simon, who has a dinosaur quarry in northern Wyoming, who's been a great supporter of all my research. So it's to be a new species named after Florence and Bob. I am so excited to get this hopefully done and submitted for peer review before the end of the year. And again, the size of this is just like a little cat. And this guy would actually have legs that were more erect under the body. Imagine a little crocodile crossed with a cat running around and coming inside your dog door or something. But oh, it would be so cute. And mammals, stinking fur balls. Okay, we're mammals. I have to give them some appreciation. We do have a number of fossil mammals known from the Wayan. These things are hard to recognize because the teeth are like the size of a pinhead. I've got Dr. Greg Wilson and Luke Weaver, one of his former students, who's been coming out and helping us describe the Wayan mammals. We've got teeth representing a number of different species that you also find in Utah. Some that you don't find in Utah. I was really, really happy. I mentioned my mentor, Bill Ackerston, from the Idaho Museum that passed away 2 years ago. Before he passed away, we were able to name a new species after him based on a single tooth. Believe it or not, this tooth is distinct enough, and this is how it kind of works with mammals. Teeth are really important in useful fossils, that we were able to show it was a new species, and we called it Similodon ackerstoni, again, after Bill Ackerston there. So Bill was just tickled pink that we were able to name that little nasty furball after him. Still more work to do on mammals. This is a jaw of a mammal. You have to take my word for it, but you can see one tooth right here, another here, another here, another here. This is getting CT scanned and imaged so we can see it better, but that's probably a new species. And here's another mammal tooth. I think, again, another new species that'll be described eventually. But we are starting to find a lot of little mammal teeth. And then eggs. So I showed you the hell chicken eggs. There are other eggs known from the Wayan Formation. I think they're still in the plaster jacket up in Bozeman. This is not them. This is just showing what they might look like. They look to be spherical, but it's entirely different sort of eggs. And it looks to be a partial nest. And I'm just waiting to see the student or someone prepare these to figure out what they are. But the Wayan's a really good source for different sorts of eggshell again. And fossil plants. I like plant fossils because they help bring it more alive. I like the animals, but if you can see the plants that are around there too, it helps me kind of envision what the landscape was like a little bit more. You've got fossil ferns and conifers. This thing that confused the crud out of me right here is actually a cross-section through a pine cone. You can see right there. I've got an example of a fossil fern from this assemblage right up here. You can see these are just gorgeous. I just love a good, pretty fossil plant. Now, something that's weird with the Wayan Formation, if you think about our dinosaurs you get here in Wyoming or Utah, it's stereotypical that dinosaurs are big. Like your big stinking sauropods. I found so many sauropods this summer in Utah. I was cursing because they're so hard to collect. I don't want to have to deal with them. I like the little guys where if you find a vertebra or a leg bone, you just pick it up and hold it. It's easy. Usually, in most dinosaur locations, that's what you find are the big things. Finding the little bones that are hollow, like bones, those are super rare. They're supposed to break really easily, not fossilize. But there's something weird going on with the Idaho dinosaurs, where the taphonomy, or the ways these things are buried, is backwards for most dinosaur places. We find what's supposed to be rare, which is little tiny bone dinosaurs. And what's normal, the big things, are actually rare, okay? So my hypothesis is, since these Erectos were digging their own burrows, that basically the reason we find them more than anything else is they were basically digging their own graves. They were getting buried in their burrows. They'd be down in their burrows, the burrow would collapse on them, which can happen, or you'd have a flood come and fill it and trap them in. That's my hypothesis for why we find these little dinos that should be super rare. As for the reason why we don't find much in the way of big ones, I just hypothesize that the ground surface above the burrows was just fairly destructive or acidic, not conducive to preserving the big bones. And that's the best evidence we have so far for why we've got that weird situation. Things just to point out, I mentioned that in Utah you have something that is coeval or equivalent to the Wayan. It's called the Mussentuchit member of the Cedar Mountain Formation. And in the Mussentuchit, this is what it looks like. Again, I've got outcrop envy because there's no plants here. Makes me a little jealous. In the Mussentuchit, you get a lot of similar animals. Both of these have little tyrannosaurs. Both have the giant hell chickens. There's actually a nice partial nest that my colleague Lindsay Zano is describing from central Utah from one of these hell chickens. And to make me jealous, they found some bones to the animal too. But both of these Idaho and Utah locations have these allosaurs. There is a new burrowing dinosaur similar to Erecto, but a different species they're describing from down there. They have iguanodontians and ankylosaurs. So it looks like Idaho was like the upland, dry desert equivalent to these Utah rocks, which were down lower and coastal. You can even extend this farther. There's similarities to Asia. And actually, this is used as a pretty good evidence that Asia was connected to North America at this time by a land bridge, because you get tyrannosauroids in rocks of this age. You get your same thing, you get your hell chickens again. And South Korea has burrowing dinosaurs like Erecto. And you have similar mammals and crocodiles and things. So it looks like animals at this time were coming back and forth from Asia and down into Western North America and vice versa. And I was trying to find a nice paleogeographic image where you could actually see that land bridge. But anyway, if you could go up here over the other side or see on there, you did have some sort of land bridge connecting North America and Asia. So we had those animals mixing. Last reason that we really care about the Wayan is if you think of your typical late Cretaceous dinosaur fauna. So think if you go to eastern Wyoming and go out to the Lance Formation, it's called. You've got Triceratops, you got T-Rex, you got your typical late Cretaceous dinos. During this time, in the earliest late Cretaceous, this is when you start to get your fauna like that, when you start to get your animals like this. So the Wayan and the Mussentuchit are important because they show how this last distinct group of dinosaurs started to appear. You've got your mix of things like your little tyrannos that are going to get much bigger, and then you've got your ancient relics like your allosaurs and orodromines like that. But this is the Wayan and Mussentuchit are important again because they show how the groups of animals are changing, how some are going to get more successful and turn big like T-Rex, and how others like some of the iguanodonts are going to disappear. So that's your late Cretaceous transition. So summary, the Wayan. I love the Wayan. It's cool. You got burrowing dinosaurs. It's a very important time period that you don't see anywhere else in North America other than Utah and Montana. You have a lot of animals. Most of them are rare. I do think if we were able to go out and do a lot of screen washing, maybe we'd find more mammals and tiny theropods and microvertebrates. Last thing, if any of you guys ever want to help with paleo, let me know. There is so much potential left in Idaho. I've got highlighted here the Mesozoic of Idaho. The red parts are the ones that I'm fairly familiar with that I've worked in a lot. All these other things, no one's really looked at. So there's just discoveries waiting to be made. And there's so many people that have helped me with this. I appreciate them all. So I threw up embarrassing pictures of them there. And now I'll let people ask me questions. So.
Thank you. So I have a question.
Yeah.
And if you can repeat the question for the Zoom audience.
Okay.
Can you describe the environment when the Wayan was being deposited? What did it look like when that rock was being formed?
Yeah. So it's asked, what was the environment like that the Wayan Formation was deposited in? So based on the evidence we have, and I'm hoping to get a soil scientist, a paleopodologist out there to really look at it for me. But what we can tell so far is there was that distinct wet season and dry season, a really dry season where you'll form these big things called calcareous nodules that form when the water table goes down and water dries up. So it looks almost like a savanna sort of situation. Some of the fossil leaves you find will have drip points, which is actually where the leaf has a point on the end where water just flows off that leaf so it doesn't get smothered. So it shows really wet and then really dry. And these would have been upland a little bit as far as to define elevation. That's harder to do, but upland a bit from the inland sea there and close to the toe of some ancient mountains.
And river deposits?
River deposits, yeah, you've got your river channels, and that's where I really want to get some good sedimentologists out there, people that can fill in all the things I don't know. But it looks like a desert environment with river channels, with mountains to the west, seaway to the east. Apparently not very good for preserving dinosaur bones unless you're burying yourself. So. Mm-hmm.
During this period of time over Wyoming and Tinka, what was occurring in the Teton Valley here?
The Teton Valley over here. So this would have been actually right on the beach to a border of inland sea. So you guys would have been getting into I'm trying to think of the deposits out here. If you get what's called the Maori Shale, their equivalent, but you'd be pretty near shore or just offshore into a seaway there. So I'll look at the, let's see. So I see one question here. Are the fossils on private state or federal lands? What are the legal requirements? So the fossils I've worked with mostly are on Forest Service land. And on Forest Service land, you have to have a permit from the Forest Service, and you have to have a museum that will take the fossils that you collect. There's a little bit of private land with Wayan that I need to figure out. A little bit of BLM and Bureau of Rec too. So that's stuff I need to get to. Again, when I have more time to look at this land ownership. So, all right, more questions out here. I'll try and watch the chat too. So.
You have that picture of that fish fossil.
Mm-hmm.
It looked pigmented. It looked colorful. Was that because of the prepping of the fossil, or was that?
That was just the preservation, the way it split out. It was kind of carbonaceous. It looked like there's some carbon involved. Yeah.
That's on the fossil. That's what
It might have been the photo. It's more black when you see it in person. There's not pigmentation on it as far as I know. I would love that. That would be so cool to see. So.
Early on, you mentioned that one of the fossils looked like a 5-kilo dinosaur. Are they all bipeds?
So asking if all the dinosaurs in the Wayan are bipeds. Most of them are. So you've got your hell chickens that are bipeds, your erecto, your tyrannosauroid, your big apex theropod. But you did have your 4-legged armored dinosaurs, that ankylosaur would be one of the ones that would be a quadruped. And that one I'm still excited about because it's something different that we've got a good skeleton from.
You talked about recovery from when 95% of the marine life went extinct. What were the conditions that brought that recovery back? And if we burn ourselves up, will we have similar conditions to bring the planet life back?
Oh, so asking what the environmental conditions were right there at the end of the Permian for that extinction and how that kind of applies to what we're seeing today. So I'll be honest, that's not a huge amount in my wheelhouse. I do know that, so I mentioned the main thought for what caused this extinction was global warming. There were a bunch of volcanoes in Russia called the Siberian Traps that erupted at this time. And when they erupted, they went through also one of the largest coal beds on the planet. So not just volcanoes pumping out these gases, but they also burned a bunch of coal on the way up, a huge deposit of coal. That caused acidification of the ocean, which makes it harder for organisms to survive in there, collapse the food chains. As far as the recovery, the little bit I understand for this recovery in the first few million years of the Triassic is you still had a lot of fluctuations with inhospitable and deadly ocean waters, causing a lot of extinctions, and things kind of cycled back and forth. A lot of extinction events regionally to globally, as far as I understand. As far as to what allowed things to bounce back, I'm just gonna guesstimate that you had this nice interval where you didn't have all these environmental perturbations going on and allowed it to recover. So when I say quick, I mean 1.5 million years isn't for us quick, but geologically, it's I guess you'd say quick. As far as how that applies to today, we could see something similar. So I just finished teaching a geology class. We're talking about coral bleaching. So right now you've got a lot of coral bleaching. You hear about how the Great Barrier Reef might be gone in a decade or two. The coral all bleached because, again, the water in this case is getting too warm. And I think there's some acidification involved as well, but more as a warmth that kills the symbiotic organisms that live in the coral. That can help cause problems with the food chain in the ocean, and it can actually affect us too. We're doing something similar to the planet. We're doing it faster, much faster than is normal geologically. So I hope that kind of helps your question a little bit. It's not super encouraging talking about it. More random questions. Am I missing any more Zoom questions? That's it. I got that one right there. So more Zoom questions? You want to compliment my hairstyle?
A question about the burrows.
Mhm.
How are they different from like the country rock around them?
Okay, that's a good question. So that's
How
one
do you know
reason.
you're in a burrow?
Yeah, that's one reason it's really hard to find them. Is easiest way to recognize a burrow in the fossil record, or just a modern one, even if you're digging through sediment, is if the burrow itself, the hole in the ground, gets filled in with a different sediment. And that's the way the Montana burrow was. It was a sandstone that went through a bunch of red mudstone layers. So it was easy to see. The Idaho one, there must have been some sort of geochemical thing going on as far as we can understand, because the sediment is not any different. It's like a red siltstone on the outside, filled in with a red siltstone that's just more indurated or more hardened for whatever reason. And I have never seen with the Idaho rictos a change in sediment type. But when you look at the association of bones and how they're always in like these nodules, where they're all mashed together in like a round rock, and where the bones aren't beat up like they're laying on the surface, the taphonomy suggests they're in burrows for most of them. And I think what's going on with the Wayan is you had a lot of burrows just collapsing. So you'd have the same sediment. You've just got it collapsing in on them. Minus one or two cases where it looks like the burrowed down into an old river channel, and you got the same sand that buried them as the river channel's made out of, but you don't have these cross beds. Like, so you'll have this layer of sandstone with these cross beds in it, but then you just have this disturbed area where all the cross beds are gone, and it's kind of this tube shape, and then there's the ericto in the base, where it looks like they burrowed down into the river channel. I would assume when it was dry, hopefully. So, good question. So, more questions? Okay, I think that's it. So.
So we have a few fossils on the table here, which you can examine.
Yeah, I'll tell you about it.
Before you leave. When we're done, chairs on that side go that way, chairs on this side go this way. September 5th, Bob Tilling, volcanoes. LJ, we have a small paleontological treasure in there for you.
I like paleontological treasures.
And if there's some questions you didn't want to ask, then come on up and ask them. And please join me in thanking LJ again. I'll go see if I can.
Oh, is that a-
LJ, thank you from the Zoom audience as well.